Hey, PreSales Collective, it's your host, James Kaikis, and today I'm going to be joined by Paul Baptist, Senior Director of Solutions Consulting at ServiceNow. The topic of today's episode is why giving back matters. And I don't want to provide much in the intro today because this conversation is incredible. Hearing Paul talk about giving back is inspirational. Typically, our episodes are 25 to 35 minutes. Today is one of the longer episodes because I didn't want to stop the conversation. I mean, it's actionable, it's inspirational, it's personal as well. And with 2021 here, we felt that this was the right episode to start the year off. People have New Year's resolutions, people have new goals for 2021. 2020 was an incredibly challenging year. And so we really want to talk about making the pre-sales community and the world generally a better place. And that is by giving back. So please enjoy today's episode. I encourage you to sit down and take today's episode in. This week's episode is sponsored by Vivint, the world's first platform designed to transform your pre-sales team into your company's most strategic asset. Hey, Paul, welcome to the PreSales Collective podcast. How's it going today?
Thanks very much. It's very, very good. It is a gray, rainy morning in Melbourne, but that is one of our 4 seasons all in one day.
I think last time I recorded a podcast with someone in the same region, it was raining as well. I'm looking forward to this episode because we are going to record this in 2020, but this is going to be the first episode of 2021, Paul. So we're kicking the year off right.
I'm super excited. And I feel like, with a topic like this, we're starting the year right, which is fantastic.
So many people talk about New Year's resolutions or things that they want to focus on in the new year. And so today's topic of why giving back matters, I think this is a great way to start. And I'll challenge anybody who's listening now, 6 months down the road, if they're like, hey, that podcast resonated with me and allowed me to kind of sharpen what I wanted to focus on for the year, we would love that feedback. But before we get there, Paul, I got to ask, you've been doing a lot for PreSales Collective and PreSales Collective and APJ. So tell us a little bit more about why you've been getting involved and some of the things that you've done.
I remember when you reached out to me a good 6 months ago now, and you had this crazy idea of, wouldn't it be great if a whole bunch of pre-sales people supported each other? And I was like, hells yeah. So, I was very excited, and I thought, what an incredible opportunity for the greater marketplace to recognize a career like pre-sales. I'm sure a lot of you listening, we all kind of stumbled into this role, and we were all surprised that there was such a job, right? But it's super exciting. It's now 6 months have gone by. We've had a couple of webinars. We've had a lot of people engaging on the Slack channel. And these are people from India, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, and a really nice mix of people. We've also been able to cover some topics that were very relevant to us in APJ. Things like, how cultural differences make a difference to the work in pre-sales, right? And you can imagine, things in Japan are significantly different to things in Thailand or in Taiwan or Australia. In some areas, we're cutting edge, like sometimes bleeding edge, but in other areas, we lag behind a little bit. And so in our industry, in pre-sales, we're making that transition from full tech into like that pseudo business person. And so we also had a discussion about what does it mean for those of us who are real technical people and how we're transitioning and how we can help that. So that's been really exciting. And of course, we are also looking to start tackling this idea of DIBS, so diversity, inclusivity, and belonging, how that's going to affect us in our environment. Again, if you've ever had Asian parents, James, and you would know that when you're growing up, your Asian mom will be, to be successful, son, you have to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. So we're now looking at how we can be a little bit more diverse in our industry. And so these are, by the way, topics that the members of the PreSales Collective in APJ have brought up as things that they would like to talk about, which is fantastic, right? And also the super exciting thing, and coming into the new year, for those of you listening in the new year, we want to build out a new leadership team for the PreSales Collective in APJ. So if you're super interested, please contact me. There's a form that you'll get to fill out. We've got all kinds of roles. And so, if you can commit a few hours a month or to many, many hours a month, there's something for everybody. So watch the space, reach out to me if you're interested. And I'd love to kind of include you in all of this.
I love that, Paul. And I appreciate all the work that you've done in APJ because throughout PreSales Collective, I've mentioned this and Yuji's mentioned this. We didn't want to be the company that started in the US and said that they were global, but really weren't global. I've worked for Belgium-based companies. I've worked with European-based companies, and we didn't want to be that. And so you've been a critical member for our expansion and growth in APJ. And so I just really wanted to say thank you on that.
Thanks for having me. It's been very exciting for me as well. It's a great outlet. You know what? It's a way of giving back.
What a segue. That wasn't planned either. That was good, Paul. Before we get there, I need to know, how did you stumble into your pre-sales career?
Stumble is the right word because I had a really good friend of mine. At the time, we weren't as close. His name was Stephen Tay, and he was about to leave a company called Pivotal CRM. So some of you may remember it. It's a Canadian, Vancouver-based company, and this was in Australia, in Melbourne. And so it was a Sunday afternoon. He invited me out for his farewell drinks. He happened to be in town, and we went to a Melbourne institution called the Gin Palace. James, if you're ever in town, we are going to the Gin Palace, and everybody else in Melbourne who you guys all know the place, exactly where it is. It hasn't changed in 20 years. We were sitting in the back booth as you walk in the door. So it's still there. The seats are there. I, in fact, was there about a month and a half ago, sitting in those exact seats. But anyway, so Stephen invites me out to drinks, and it was his farewell drinks. And we're sitting there having a nice gin. And he basically says, you know what, Paul? I think you would be really great in pre-sales. And I was like, thank you. What on earth is that? And so he described it as, well, you're really there to get to be the technical part of the sales team. I was like, what's that? And so this happened on a Sunday afternoon. And by Thursday, the following week, I was a pre-sales person, Pivotal CRM in Melbourne, Australia. I was the second person in that group. And I remember just turning up, and I used to be someone in the services arm of Pivotal CRM in a partner. So, I'm used to implementing software, not pre-sales. So it took me a really long time to click that switch in the brain, where you go, I have to make this work for realsies into, I really only have to paint a vision and put together a great story to talk about and deliver a solution that makes sense for the customer. That's how I fell into it. So Stephen gave me that incredible opportunity. I went from there and into pre-sales, did that for several years, then realized that I really should get back to some of my roots in post-sales, did that for a couple of years and went, wow, that's really hard. You have to be accountable. So I went back to pre-sales and loved it ever since.
I love that perspective because I came from post-sales at one point as well. And it really does give you a perspective of how hard things are post-sale, like post-signature, onboarding, implementation, but it makes you a better pre-sales professional at the end of the day.
I agree. For those of us who have made the transition and have been comfortable with that, not necessarily owning everything from start to the very, very end, it's incredible because you know what it means to take it to the end. So I agree with you. I think it's an incredible experience. In fact, for those of you who are listening, who started your career in pre-sales and have done that only, I would encourage you, where possible, give yourself a secondment. Go do some post-sale work for a couple of years, and you'll gain incredible insight into what happens after the sale's done.
We are giving people a lot of things to go and challenge themselves. So 2021, I like it. We're off to a good start. Paul, I'm really excited about this topic because I think it's a lot of the genesis of PreSales Collective generally, and the people that are involved in going through why giving back matters is really important. So I want to start kind of high level. How do you personally define giving back?
I think the definition is so different for different people. For me personally, it's about meeting basic needs at the start. And when I say giving back in this example, I am speaking more philanthropically. Giving back for me is meeting people's personal needs. I remember being in university, and a lot of us in uni or college, we never really had a lot of money, right? But I remember about a 2-week period where I was dead broke, right? And all I did was I bought this 40 pack of 2-minute noodles, and I ate that for 2 straight weeks because that's all I could afford, right? And I swore to myself, never, ever will I be in this position ever again. And then I also kind of made this extra little promise that says, and never, ever will I have people within my circle of influence go through this as well. And so once I started making money and had a job, I also would still have friends in uni. I try to just give back a little bit, right? I'll pick up the check this time. No worries. When you guys have jobs, you guys can pick out for me. And so I think meeting people's basic needs was really, really important to me. But the thing I've also learned is that you don't have to do big things Like, it doesn't have to be grandiose things that says, I've got $1 million, I'm giving it away. No, I think you should do what you can, because small things matter in big, big ways to the people you help. And guess what? Giving back isn't about you. It's about the people who receive it, right? So do what you can. Small things matter in big ways to the people whom you help. And I think that's one of the key things to remember. So personally for me, basic needs and do what you can, and small things matter.
I really like that small things matter, because a lot of times people are like, well, I don't have the money to give back, or I can't do this grand thing, but it's more than just money. It's time, it's energy, it's the thought that you can put back. And whether you have a lot of money in your pockets or not, like, you can always give back. And that means more to people in the short term, the medium term, and the long term. So I like your perspective there.
Over the years, I've been given a lot of opportunities to give back in different ways. And I look at it as there are several things that, for us, if we kind of hone back into a pre-sales person, that we can give. Number one is time. You can always give your time. Number two are skills. As a pre-sales professional, you have certain skills that bridge the gap between technology and business, right? You've developed this incredible experience from all of the engagements with different kinds of businesses, large ones, small ones, all kinds of different people from different walks of life. So you have skills. And then finally, you have knowledge. There are things that you can share with people that will help them in whatever they're doing. And so money, to some extent, and I say this because I feel very blessed that money is not the measure anymore, but rather time, skills, knowledge. I think there are so many other ways that we can give back, and we should explore all of them.
I really like what you just said about that money necessarily isn't it anymore. And I think what I love about the pre-sales role is that it can be a very lucrative career, to the point where you start being able to make enough money that your quality of life is great. And I feel very fortunate to be in the position that I'm in. And I know other professionals I talk to the same. And so you're right. Like, that giving back means so much more than just that paycheck every other week.
Absolutely. And from my perspective, one of the things that we should also think about is what it means to give back. I know when you and I were talking about this topic, one of the things that you were asking me about was like, why does it actually matter? Why should this matter? Why should people care? And whilst we can wax lyrical about how magnanimous it is, how we can make the world a better place, I also think that there are some fundamental truths about giving back. You can only give when you have something to give. So if you think about it, if it's money, like you mentioned, we're in a lucrative career. Thankfully, we have enough to give. And absolutely, if you can, please do so. But if you have time, you've learned how to do your job so well that you now have time to give. If you've got certain skills you've developed, you've learned, you've read, you've trained yourself to the point where you have skills that you can share. And if knowledge, you've gained all this experience and you're willing to share. So really, it comes down to, in order to give, you have to have something to give. And so it forces you to actually develop yourself. It forces you to focus on the things that you're passionate about so that you can develop that, and so that you have enough that you can give. And I think that's the selfish look at it, right? It's nice to give, but selfishly, you actually get so much more before you actually start giving.
Let me ask you about a topic that's been kind of top of mind. When you think about like Salesforces of the world or some of these other companies, they talk a lot about stakeholder capitalism. And this is a theme that was really top of mind in 2020. Companies are really encouraging giving back from their employees as a representation of their company and their organization and their values. Have you noticed that trend over the last couple of years, and how that actually helps people find more affinity in their day-to-day job?
Absolutely. And, my background is Pivotal CRM, Aprimo, marketing automation, Salesforce for many, many years. And now I'm at ServiceNow. And I have seen that trend in the last couple of jobs. We've actually seen so much more emphasis put on giving back. And if I'm being very pragmatic about it, if I put my technical analytical brain on for a second and ask the question, why are they doing this? I think it's because companies realize that there is, in fact, more to life than just making money. Who would have thought companies with souls? But it happens. And that's because companies are made up of people, and people have that desire to make the environment around them better. And I think when we're so focused on work to the point where, we give up that part of ourselves, we become less whole. And when you're less whole, you again have less to give, whether it's giving philanthropically to someone else selflessly or giving to your job, you have less to give. And so companies are beginning to realize that to have a wholesome, holistic employee is to empower them to give and to give to something that they're passionate about. And again, I'm speaking about what I find passionate about giving back, but I've got really good friends, colleagues who give back by reading in their kids' schools. And that's perfectly fine. That's a form of how they feel whole themselves. And so I think, find something you're super passionate with and do it is what's there. But again, putting the analytical brain back on, why would a company do this? Because if you have a way of giving and in turn getting so much more back, being rejuvenated, guess what? You're a much better employee. You're going to work better. You're going to fall sick a lot less. You're going to have less mental stress. Things like that matters in a job. And so, whilst it may seem so nice of them to give back, I also think, they get a lot in return too.
Thank you for providing that perspective. With PreSales Collective, in terms of feedback, I get a lot of requests and thoughts on mentorship programs and coaching and those types of things. So I wanted to ask what your perspective on mentorship is.
Number one, I also think that's a great way of giving back. And the reason why I say it's such a great way of giving back is because mentorship is selfless. And you're probably wondering why I'm saying that. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is because I learned a really big lesson in the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And so I know today, most of us know that there is a difference between sponsorship and mentorship. But this lesson I learned 5 or 6 years ago when it was still the cool new thing. And I hadn't heard of it. In my mind, I was thinking yeah, it's mentorship, right? If I have someone who's my mentor, then surely they would be on my side and helping me grow my career and so on. Now, sponsorship is a whole other topic. I actually think you should absolutely put out a podcast on sponsorship, but let's speak specifically about mentorship. So mentorship is selfless. Sponsorship is more symbiotic. Mentorship is something that a mentor, for you in a position of being a mentor, it's something that you give asking nothing in return. That's the key thing. You ask nothing in return. Sponsors, they give, but they get something in return. Now, nothing nefarious. It's symbiotic. Both parties get a lot out of it. And from my perspective, I think realistically, when you look at trying to be a mentor, because it's selfless, it's not about you. It's really about your mentee. Who are they? What do they need? What will help them? And by the way, because it's selfless and because it's so focused on the mentee, ultimately, it's really about who you are and what you're willing to give them and what they need that's most important. And by the way, again, all the skills of being a pre-sales professional comes into play. You need to spend time with them, right? Do some discovery, learn what their pains are, what their challenges are, build out a solution of what you can offer, and then spend that time and present that back to them in a way that they can receive and they will get value out of. I'm a massive pre-sales nerd. I find pre-sales skills in everything. But yeah, for me, mentorship is really important. I think it's a great way to give back. And it's also something that we should all do. Now, it can also be for a period. I know a lot of people look at mentorship and go oh, I may not have the time. And that's okay. That's okay, because we're all busy people. We have different priorities. But it can be for a time. It can be one meeting. It can be 2 meetings. It can be 3 times that you meet. And that could be enough. And on the flip side, if those of you are listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, hey, I'd love to ask someone to be my mentor, but it's really quite awkward and I don't know how to do that. Well, it's actually super simple. It's just a question of trying to find something that you believe that you can benefit from this relationship with this mentor and asking them for some time. And again, it's not a massive commitment. It doesn't have to be that big. You give what you can of your time, and that's what counts. So coming back to this, what's my perspective on it? It's selfless. I think that especially if you've developed in your career, if you've learned lots of skills and experience and knowledge, then you should pass it on and help somebody else.
I like that you talked about time bounding it to 1, 2, 3 occasions, because I think you're right. A lot of people, even myself, I'm oh man, do I have time to really commit to somebody this many hours a week, this many hours per month? and over the next 1 to 2 years. But you're right. It could be a short engagement. This is funny because it's timely. I was in a virtual coffee on PreSales Collective today, and I was talking to somebody and we were talking about, hey, how you get value out of PreSales Collective. And they mentioned to me how much they love virtual coffee and they love donut and connecting with random people. And somebody who's only been in a pre-sale role for like a year or two was connected with someone who's trying to get into pre-sales. And that person said, hey, will you be my mentor? And the person that I talked to on virtual coffee told me today, he goes, I have never thought of actually mentoring somebody because I've only been in the role for 1 or 2 years. He said, I thought that was for people who've been in the role for 5 years or 10 years or 15. And he said that it enlightened him that there is this entire community out there of people who are either in university or in their first jobs that want to get into this profession. And they're looking for people who have 1 or 2 years of experience to be mentors. And those people have much more experience. And so for those that are listening that say, hey, I'm looking for a mentor, I don't have the experience to be a mentor myself, I challenge that because I heard that experience today. And I think there's plenty of people out there, whether you consider yourself a mentee only, you can be a mentor to people who are coming into this industry.
That's super interesting that you brought this up because in fact, what I've just done recently is I've asked somebody who, I guess in terms of experience in years on this earth, being a lot younger, I've asked them to be my mentor because I wanted a real perspective on what it's like to be a millennial. Because I don't know what it's like to be a millennial, but I'm hiring millennials. I'm managing them. Like, it's really important to understand. And so I think you hit the nail on the head. It should not be about how many more years you've done something, but it should be about you having some knowledge or experience that someone else can benefit from and making that available. And so for mentees, right, even if you're in your 40s or 50s or 60s or whatever age you are, there's always something new to learn and there's someone you can learn from. So look at it from that perspective. And I think that will give you a lot more comfort.
That should be the title of the podcast right there. Paul, we are challenging status quos to start off 2021. I really enjoy it. I do want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier, just to define it. Could you briefly explain the differences, maybe with some examples of sponsorship versus mentorship? Because I know that I'm still new to sponsorship in terms of its difference. And I'm sure that there's some people listening that have that same perspective. So I do just want to check that box to make sure that we can define the difference.
So I'm going to tell a story of a lesson I learned, which wasn't a good lesson, but a lesson nonetheless. And by the way, lessons come from all over the place. They don't all have to be good experiences, but we take what we can from them.
Sometimes you learn more from a bad experience than a good. I'm a firm believer in that.
Exactly. And this is a not so nice experience, unfortunately. But I remember this is a while ago. I won't say how many years because that will just give away how much experience I have. But this is a while ago, and I had just been passed over for a promotion. Of course, after getting across being upset about it, I invited the manager who made the decision out to breakfast, and we sat down and we spoke about it. And I very politely said, rather than trying to change your mind, Mr. Manager, the next time a decision like this comes up, what can I do better to make sure that I'm in the mix? So not an unreasonable question. I'm not making demands, nothing like that at all. And then he replied quite simply, well, the reason why she was successful and you weren't is because I sponsored her and you don't have one.
Oh.
I was quite taken aback. And then I stopped for a second and I thought about it to myself. That's actually okay. So now I know that, by the way, that was the first time I'd ever heard of sponsorship in this context, right? Up till now, I'm still thinking like big sponsors, right? Nike and Michael Jordan and stuff. So this is the first time I heard it. And of course, I was taken aback. I decided to do some research around what on earth sponsorship actually is in the context of a career. And this is when I found out about this difference between mentorship being selfless and sponsorship being symbiotic. So in sponsorship, it's a symbiotic relationship where the sponsor is usually the person that approaches the sponsoree, if that's the right word. And they do that because they feel that they can help that person, but in return, they get something back. So let me give you an example of what that could be. So let's just say as a manager, I have certain skills that I need in my team. Maybe it's someone who is extremely technical, but also has amazing EQ. But this person's quite young, maybe 1 or 2 years into their career. And because mine's a specialist organization, we look for people with much more years of experience. Now, as a sponsor, what I can do is I can actually help this person grow in their career by talking about them in lots of different places. Did you know that James, he's quite young, but, he's got these incredible skills. And I think we should give him more opportunities to develop in speaking on stage and doing these things, right? I'm basically speaking about you, but in return, as you develop your skills, guess what? Now, all of a sudden you have all the skills I need to be able to bring you into my team. So that kind of relationship is very different. So, I'm helping you, but I know I'm going to get something back in return.
Thank you for breaking that down. I mean, I use the word affinity a lot. There's the affinity to the sponsor. So that's good perspective. And I mean, you learn the hard way. I mean, even for me, hearing you tell your story, I'm like, damn, that would be harsh to take in at the time.
That cut deep.
It did. I mean, cut me deep. My response was, oh man, ow, I wasn't expecting you to say that. But it's those lessons that you do learn. And I really appreciate you breaking down this section because I think it's so vital and so pivotal. And a lot of things that we're trying to do at PreSales Collective and a lot of things we'll be focusing on in 2021 around that giving back and that mentorship and the mentee relationship.
If you're in a position where you can sponsor someone, do it. Because I think there's a lot of people who deserve a helping hand. So if you're in a position to sponsor someone, do it. If you're in a position to sponsor many people, do it even more.
It'll pay you back in droves, in my opinion. It really will. I guess as we're talking about sponsorship and mentorship, is there a specific person that really took you under your wing and has resonated with you beyond your introduction into pre-sales?
The person who basically sticks to my mind the most is, of course, Stephen, who introduced me to pre-sales. Unfortunately, he is now the late Stephen Tay, which basically makes it more precious in my mind and in my life. He did fantastically. And the selflessness of this man was he would check in with me every 2 or 3 years, even though we had moved apart and he was living in Australia and I was in the UK. He would check in with me. He would go visit his brother and he'll pop in, he'll fly. He started living out of Fort Lauderdale. And whenever he came home to Sydney, he will drop by Melbourne, which is not a short flight, by the way, drop by to see me. The selflessness of this man was incredible. And he would always check in with how I was doing my career, what he can help out with, things like that. So in the back of my mind, Stephen, always number one. But, I've also learned from a number of other people. I'm pretty sure they won't mind me sharing their names, but Wendy Johnston, who is now the COO at Zendesk in APJ, incredible lady. She taught me a very valuable lesson, which I'd love to share as well with you guys. I was speaking to her about going for a specific promotion, a specific role. And she pulled me aside and she said, I'd like for you to think about it a different way. She says, if you go for a single role, then the choices you have are you get the job, yay, you're happy. You don't get the job, boo, you're sad. It's black and white. She said, rather than doing that, look at what the role will give you in terms of skills. Look at all the skills you would like to develop. And then as you list those things down, look across the entire organization, whether it's within the company you work for now or outside, and look at roles and what skills they will allow you to develop. And then tick those off. All of a sudden, when you look at it from that perspective, if you don't get one role, then that's okay. Another role might still give you the benefits of skills you develop. So, such a different perspective, right? Because for all of us, when we're in a job, we chase the next thing, meaning, let me get that promotion. And then when we don't get it, we're like, it hurts so bad, right? Where she's basically saying, just list out the skills you want and then go find them. And then that way you win all the time.
That's great perspective.
Yeah, incredible. So, Wendy's great. And I've had so many more. And again, these, by the way, I've only really spoken to her maybe 3 times. And this one lesson has been in my mind for many, many years now. So again, mentorship, it can be for a period. It doesn't have to be forever.
We're talking about people who've made an impact in your life, and you're a people manager. So as a leader, how do you encourage your employees to give back without pressuring them to do that?
Yeah, I remember a company I used to work for that there was a certain amount of pressure that came with it. I think number one is always lead by example. If you do, then others will feel comfortable doing what you do. So I make it a point that if I go and do something like, if I'm doing a mentoring session, I will openly say I'm not free at this time because I have a mentoring session. That really signals to other people that says, hey, it's okay for me to spend time doing that too. Before COVID, I used to go to Cambodia to build houses. And I would very openly put it in my calendar, off to Cambodia, building houses. It's in my out of office. I would also invite them to come along. So those kinds of things, I think absolutely lead by example. The other thing is create opportunities where you can do things together. Another one of my good friends who you've spoken to, Steph Barnett, she would actually organize for her team and other people to go to Two Good Foods down in Sydney to cook food for people in need. So things like that, create opportunities. I think that's also really important. And then, of course, coming back to this topic that clearly you and I are very passionate about, mentorship, is introduce people. So if someone comes up to you and says like, hey, James, can you mentor me? And you don't have the time, you might say, you know what? I don't have the time, but boy, do I have someone that you can speak to. Do the introduction stuff. I think that's a great way. So by all means, as a leader, if you want to instill this idea of giving back, you have to do these things. You have to be the one to do. You have to go create opportunities and then introduce people and give them opportunities to be able to share their experience as well.
You are dropping so much knowledge on everyone right now. This is incredible. Those are great, tangible examples, and leaders that are listening can take those as takeaways. And even if you're not a leader of a team, you can continue to do those types of things too. And you're right, the openness and the creating of opportunities really does set the tone. And that's how you create culture. And I think that's how you create company cultures when you're not in office as well. So, Paul, I got to ask a really specific question. What do you get out of giving back?
It rejuvenates my soul. It's okay if you're not like super ultra spiritual and you don't necessarily believe that. That's okay. But what I will say is that it really forces me to be better than I was before. And I always have this thing in my mind. I don't do it every day. I'm not that obsessive about it, but every few days I'll kind of ask myself a question as like, are you better today than you were yesterday? And so I think that when I give back, one, I get so much more back in return. I talk about this Cambodia house building thing that I do. About 2 years ago, we were in Cambodia and we were building a house for a mom who was a widow and her then 13-year-old daughter. And so building this home, and they were living in a shack. It literally took us like 30 minutes to pull that entire thing down. Right? It was like a shack. And at the time, only the mom was there at the house because the daughter was working. The mom makes brooms for $1.50 a day. And she wasn't working that day. She was at the home because she wasn't well. And hence the daughter was working. So we built the home, and yes, it felt great. Yay. Everyone's happy. They have a home. Great. But we took it a step further. Like a few of us then went, the daughter's working. Does she go to school? No, she doesn't. So we kind of bandied around and said, there's about 15 of us there, and bandied around and says like, well, this isn't cool. I mean, like, what can we do to help? So we put together a fund for her daughter, and we put together like a monthly stipend where each month, like nothing fancy, we weren't being obviously charitable and like making their life 100% better. We're hoping to teach people to fish, not give them the fish. So we put together a little stipend where every month they would have enough to eat so that the basic needs are met. But the best part about it is that today, like 2 years later, the daughter is back in school. When she started 2 years ago, even though she was 13, she had to go to the second grade because that's what her reading level was. Today, she's now in high school. So clearly an incredibly intelligent young woman to be able to get back in 2 years, jump back to where she is. She goes to school. She's happy. I'm sure you can tell, right? Like I'm just like, beaming and just super excited about hearing that. And that's what I get out of it, right? That's the kick I get. The fact that hopefully I've made one tiny difference in one human being's life, and that should be enough.
Paul, this is amazing. I really appreciate you sharing your story. That is inspirational to me, like hearing that type of story and like, wow, that little bit that you did and that group did to give back. I mean, that's the stuff that matters in life. At the end of the day, the jobs and the promotions and the titles and all that stuff's great. But when you really can make a material impact like that on people's lives, it rejuvenates the soul. And that's what a legacy is. That's how people remember you at the end of the day. So I really appreciate you getting personal and sharing some stories.
Absolutely. By the way, I have heaps more stories about Cambodia. And you know what? If you guys who are listening, you guys are interested, as soon as COVID's lifted, bang, I'm back there. It'll be my 10th trip, which basically means it'll be a party. So everyone's invited.
I think that might have to be a PreSales Collective event. I'm in. APJ event.
We should absolutely do that. The APJ PreSales Collective get together will be in Cambodia.
You heard it. We are doing it. Charitable event. We will make that happen, Paul. I really enjoyed this podcast. Before we wrap, I got to ask the standard questions that I wrap with. So let me do that. What is your favorite thing about this pre-sales role?
Favorite thing, hands down, I get to be both a technical person and a business person. I'm sure you've done this exercise before where you get people to describe you as what your values are, what you're good at. And I did that several years ago. And someone wrote this one word and she wrote catalyst. And I'm like, yes. That's what pre-sales is. We're the catalysts. We make things happen, right? And I think that's incredible. So I love the role because of that. I love the fact that we get to meet people from different backgrounds, small companies, big companies, people from all walks of life. And we get to learn about what makes these businesses and these people tick. Like, how exciting is that? So massive pre-sales nerd. I love it. I can't think of a better job.
Well, you've given us a lot of advice today, but if you had to sum it up, what kind of advice do you have for people who are searching for ways to give back?
Start small. Like I said, it doesn't have to be big. What's small to you can be massive to the person receiving it. So start small, try different things. If you're not sure about what you're passionate about, that's okay. Try lots of different things till you find the one that you're passionate about. And there is no shame in what you're passionate about. Your passion is your passion. Don't let people tell you, oh, why aren't you feeding the sick and why are you walking dogs? No, you be passionate about what you're passionate about. Bring someone along in the journey. Don't just do it yourself, because you know what? It's more fun when you do it with somebody else. About mentorship, you guys all know how passionate I am about it. You can learn to be a mentor by having mentors yourself. So go and have a few people, not just, your direct manager, people inside your business, outside your business, in your personal life, because we can learn from everywhere. And as you learn how they give to you, you too can learn how to give to others.
I've really enjoyed this conversation, Paul, because it's been personal, it's been actionable. There are clear takeaways. And I think it really sets the tone for 2021, whether that's for you, for me, for PreSales Collective, for our profession. I really think that this matters. And as PreSales Collective continues to grow and continues to become a global community and really gives back, this is vital to our success. And really the successes we've had in 2020 are because of people putting the energy in and giving back. And so I really appreciate you sharing your personal stories to set 2021 off on the right foot. So thanks again.
No problems. Just as a last thought, I think when we commit to doing something, we will do it when we feel we're accountable. So if any of you listening wants to have someone you're accountable to, ping me on the Slack group and tell me what you want to do, and I'll hold you accountable to it. Happy to do that.
What a giving back offer. Paul, thanks a lot. Really appreciate the convo. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, James. Will do. Take care.
All right, PreSales Collective. What an incredible episode. Hearing Paul's passion and his thoughts on giving back is inspirational. It's motivating. And I really felt that this was the way that we needed to start 2021 off. We've been so thankful for the PreSales community giving back and allowing PreSales Collective to become a global audience and a global group. There are more than 8,500 people signed up on PreSales Collective. And if only 10% gave back to the profession or to the community, we could achieve so much. And hearing Paul and things that he wants to do and wants to achieve, I'm going to challenge everyone as you evaluate 2021, the goals, your personal goals, your professional goals, New Year's resolutions, the things that you want to achieve. Figure out how giving back to people in pre-sales, whether it's with PreSales Collective or not, can be on that list. It doesn't take much. Time, skills, and knowledge is what Paul told us. I love that he talked about leading by example. I love that he talked about mentorship and sponsorship. I'm going to encourage everyone to join virtual coffees. I'm going to encourage you to join the local groups and also the mentor-mentee program within the Slack environment. If you want to be held accountable, reach out to Paul as well. I don't know about you, but I am very excited to give back and try to make the Cambodia APJ event a reality in 2021 or 2022. All right, PreSales Collective, I hope to see you next week. Let's make 2021 a great year and one of the best years of our lives.